What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Bind, and this is the Deus Ex Professional Fan Art project. Now, what does that even mean? I hear you ask. Well, I am aware of the contradiction there, don't you worry. So, of course, by definition, if fan art was to be professional, it would have to be contracted by the license holder / IP holder, which would mean it would make that official art and not fan art. Fan art usually is not official art, therefore you can only really publish this without monetizing. But that is a gray area. As an artist, for example, in a gallery, you can citate popular art and there's no problem with that, and you can even sell your artwork, but it's not as easy most of the time. So without further ado, let's get into the process. And the process starts with what you would do as a professional, and this is the whole point of this. I'm gonna treat this as if this was contracted work, as if I was working for the license holder. So let's get into it. So first thing we do, of course, is our due diligence, aka some research. Now this franchise, Deus Ex, started back in the 90s when I was a teenager, and this is pretty much the cover of the first game in the franchise. I think Iron Storm was the publisher, and that was the cover art. And I want to do art that has to do with the first iteration of the game, because I went through Steam and some forums, see what's out there, and the most stuff that is out there is related to the more recent iterations, more recent entries of the game, which is, I think, is called Human Revolution and Mankind Divided. Those they have a different design language, they have a different protagonist, and I think his name is Adam. And so most of the fan art is evolving around the new protagonist. But there is a lot of people like myself who fancy the first entry the most. So, and also coincidentally, there is not as much stuff out there for the first game in terms of fan art, way less than for the new games. So I thought it would be fun to orientate on the first one, and for that I did what I always do. I went online, searched through images, forums, screenshots of the game, and this is what I came up with, which, as you can see, that was just is a Photoshop montage of the things that stood out to me the most. So there's a question to, of course, what did the art look, and then what does what is the game like? What does the game look like? So you can see it's old graphics, but to me that's an advantage, because that means I can interpret more. If everything was like very fancy and refined, that would mean you kind of have less freedom imposed on you. So here some scenes of the game. I played this game back in the day, but I barely remember everything in terms of the story. I know this guy, and I know it starts out, I think, over there in Manhattan, and then we're going to Asia and other places, right? So also there's other people. So if you don't know this franchise, this is about basically human augmentation, cyborg technology. So it's a future sci-fi thriller, and the main protagonist is an augmented soldier / agent, and he has to uncover quite some conspiracy quite some conspiracies, I guess, right, around the world. So you can see it's a lot of darks, a lot of blues, and that is definitely what I want to go for. So I want to do, I thought a post similar to this would be good, but not from the same perspective. This is always a good twist. And then next we're going to do some sketching to find the post, the content, the composition. So this is basically what I would, sometimes I would print stuff out and so that I can even draw into it, but this I think is enough for me, and that has been a selection because I had way more images than this. This is just the images that I ended up with. It's the logo, it's the original art, and there is some stuff that informs the character. For example, this profile view, which is very interesting because you can see kind of where stuff is on his face, and then you can see some of the suit. You can also see like the here the menu, the makeup of his skills and augmentations and all of that jazz. And then what you can also see is stuff like soldiers that are, I guess, your enemies in the game. You can see the way the art treats the tones in the skyline. So this is screenshots from the game as opposed to this art. Of course, could not possibly look like this back in the day. But it is interesting because it's very dark and it's very lighting driven graphics, I would say. There's some flying objects, there's some other cyborg characters, some street scene, and that is a statue, I think, in one of the main institutions that is like grabbing the world, which is like, well, metaphor would be too much, but it's like I guess a hint at world domination, or just having a grasp on the entire world, which is kind of iconic. So maybe work with that. And here we have some voice-com Star Wars like scan-lined face that is like floating in the ether and you can talk to. So that is also interesting. So I want to mix all of that and see what happens. So yeah, let's jump into the sketchbook and see what we can come up with. So as you can see, guys, I did 4 faint pencil drawings, and these I'm not just doing them very faintly because of the video. That's how I always do them, because I don't want to erase out too dark of values later, so would damage the paper sometimes, and also I wouldn't see the effect of the line work well enough. So out of those references that you just saw, I distilled 4 shots basically. And this is the first one, which is kind of a total of the character standing on a pier. And yeah, that's usually something that is rather safe. You're starting out with something that could be a possibility, but is also not the most daring, I think. So the advantage of the small, very small drawings to me is that even though they're kind of mapped out with a pencil drawing, I still, in my head, I'm like, I can't change anything anytime. And yeah, that's what sometimes also happens without, I just overwrite what the pencil drawing says with the inker here, and then move on. And as you move on, those iterations becomes less, becomes much more apparent what the difference is. For example, second drawing has the character closer. Now, and the background is much more simple on this one. So it's much more of a designy take than the first, where it's just a chaotic movie kind of take. So in this, I'm playing much more with the shapes of the background structure versus the character. Trying to fit in the little statue thing. And of course, you at that point you have to take into consideration the color that is coming in a second. What I'm doing mostly now, and that's what I'm writing down, is the values that I'm planning. So I like to have a decent amount of blacks. I wrote, I think, something like 30%, and then I'm writing down what values I want for the white and the blues, the reds, I think. And it's just so that I remember, the moment that occurs to me that I have a color idea, I'm either writing it down or I'm putting some colors on the side, or make just more annotations. So now character becomes bigger and bigger. I think that's the thing here. The scene becomes more daring, and yeah, a little bit more intense in terms of the character facing the frame and the camera, I guess. So now I'm trying this setting with like the broken Statue of Liberty, which is in the game, so it's a clear reference here that I thought would work much better than the building that I had before, which is not recognizable really. Also, I realized that I get away with using a lot of blacking out a lot of the character because it's really not important what's down there. This character is very much defined just by the belly upwards, I would say, face, and then design of the armor and the jacket opening. That's a nice graphical gimmick here. So now there is a twist, which is that we're facing, like we're turning the character 90 degrees towards like a portrait mode. This occurred to me while sketching while doing the initial pencil sketches, that it would be cool to do the iconic pose, just turn it around, right? Because I've never seen this done, and I was wondering if you could still recognize that pose, and I think you can. And so this is getting even bigger, more daring, and now trying to really put more details in here so that you can see how this armor plate and everything could look more close up. Of course, I have to invent some stuff here because on the original designs it does not have the fidelity to tell me what to draw, which also is a good thing because then you can really make up your own stuff in terms of design for the character. Which is, at the end of the day, I already said this, I want to bring something new to this kind. I know it's titled fan art, but it's really not interesting for me to just recite a perfect design. I want to bring something new every time I do anything, even in the realms of fan art or citating popular art. So I feel this is getting somewhere, but I feel immediately that probably I won't get away with the sky city here crossing the head, because there's too little space, I think, for the head and for the visor and for that effect that I want to put there. So already while inking, I thought to myself, well, I kind of have to get rid of some stuff around the head, because it's nice and calm down there where I'm shining the lights, but up where the head is, it's a little bit too busy, even though it looks kind of cool now. But if it's getting bigger and more complicated, it will look I think too cluttered up. So And yeah, we're pretty much done with the inking process. I use the eraser there for a bit, but because my pencil drawing is so faint, I don't need to erase a lot. And next step, of course, is preparing the colors. And as you can see, I have quite some colors in my repertoire, and I even made a color chart where I can see how immediately how the color behaves on paper. So the thing about watercolor is everybody thinks, yeah, it's very bright colors and very transparent. That is true, but if you want to have a lot of pigment and a lot of pure pigment, it is better to use a pure color than it is to mix colors, because they get a little bit muddier and less brilliant, less vibrant as you mix them up. So here's a look at my chart, which represents just the colors in my box basically. And now I'm kind of deciding which blues and which reds I want, because the colors, I said this before, they always look different when they're dry than they will look on paper. So it's very good to even have a sheet, a sample sheet, that you are doing live sampling of the mixture that you're using. And I also, if I'm doing more intricate watercolors, I do this a lot. Even here you can see that I'm retesting the color on the paper. It's not that crucial here, and usually maybe I would not do it. I'm just doing everything a little bit more in depth now just for the video. I usually would do the sketches maybe a little bit rougher, maybe only do 2 or 3. Sometimes only do 1 if I'm perfectly satisfied. But doing iterations is always useful. So immediately you can see the second that you put any color there, it looks so much better. And now the advantage in watercolor, of course, is that if you use a waterproof ink, you can't mess it up. You will have to have a lot of paint, a lot of pigment on your brush to cover up that black at all, right? With some of the pigments, it's not even possible. So don't need to be very careful with that, which is something I like. I like the look, and also I think what you learn there is that you don't need 1,000 different colors. In fact, it's much better to reduce the palette. And we will do also that later digitally. You can see that we'll pretty much stick to a very linear palette with only blues pretty much for like 80% of the entire color palette, and then mix in some of the desaturated grays and some of the reds. So yeah, the shadows on the character in the first frame are a great example. I did not plan this. That just came to me. So even with the watercolor, you can even change the initial idea even further. So from the pencil to the inking process, you can change it, you can overrule it, and then you can kind of overrule aspects of it again just by applying colors, different colors, or even more shading with the watercolor. So now, I mean, immediately, because that's what's great about this, immediately I'm doing something in the second frame that I was not doing in the first frame. I use more color, make it more vibrant, make it more bold decisions, because everything is also a little bit closer. Trying to get more contrast. So that's also a great thing to try, because you could do even a different color palette in one of the frames, and then say, okay, I like the color palette in frame 3, but I like the drawing style or the pose from frame 2, and then even combine those. So you kind of get even more iterations than you did here, because you can mix and match even. So from one you can get really an idea and take something and apply it to the final piece, no matter if you like everything in that frame or not. Now comes the reds, and now I changed the approach. As you can see, I went from background color to highlights, and now I'm doing it the other way around. Because the thought process is, if you change something on your order, your process, it will change more than just that. It will end up changing much more than you think. So I just turn it around. I just start with the reds and then bring the blues later. Also, that way you can see more of an impact on the red, on the white, before you bring the rest, which is not like painfully obvious just on the small frames now in the video, even though I did my best to make the color grading so that you can see everything. But of course it is more vibrant in the scan that you will see later, and also in real life. I'm pretty satisfied with this turns out here, because you can sense the water that divides like the island and the background pretty well. So this is really working. And then there's just the more tones, bringing a little bit more of the red. That's just a design choice to bring a little bit of the reds in the lower left, and bring a little bit of reds even on the gun. So now we're getting even more bolder, but that just suits, I think, the ink drawing, because that was the idea. You get more up close, you get bolder, more contrasty, get more depth on the character, because it's really close now. So yeah, and then that's like a rainy sky. Now we get rid of a lot of the lights, a lot of the helicopter lights. We just have like lights there in the lower part, which is like striving lights from off screen, which I ended up deciding not using because it's like kind of a missed opportunity. So already while doing this, I was kind of thinking that I needed a mixture of those frames, because I didn't have the perfect frame here. I really like this profile with the iconic looking up pose. I really wanted that to work, and that's why I spent a fair amount of time on it. I think coloring that I almost spent 30 minutes, which is pretty extensive for such a small sketch, because I really wanted to see how far I can push even the detail on this small format. And I think it ends up working pretty well. It's pretty convincing for what I was going for. Now some last touch-ups, and we're pretty much done with this page. Turned out pretty okay, so I can really work with that and see what I like the most from all the iterations. So guys, here is what we got from the sketching session. I'm not usually doing this that in depth, meaning I do it a little bit more rough. This was just to make a point to showcase to you guys that you really can, if you spend 2-3 hours, you can refine, you can plan the outcome quite substantially just through small sketches. So this is what we did. You just saw it, and we have 4 iterations, 4 ideas basically. And what you can also see that up here I wrote down some notes for me, and this is not rare for me, so I would once in a while also write stuff in here or in the paper. I would say this is supposed to be the lighting from this side, or I would say I want some yeah, some more details on the gun or stuff like that, right? Stuff that you cannot quite see in this small of a format, but is important. As is, of course, what I wrote down up here, which is the distribution of color, which is something I always want to remember. So in this case, I know that I want there to be quite some blacks, so I wrote down 30% blacks. And the majority of the panel should be blue. I wrote something like 40%, and then 5 to 10% I want the red artificial highlights, right? So the red is something that I'm adding to the mix. It's not really in the official art from back in the game. The character does not have any red lights or anything, but he also doesn't have any other colors, so it's basically just white lighting throughout the entire thing. So therefore, and because of the new games, it's all yellow, I wanted to add something different and something that complements the blues, which is perfect to use a red or a magenta type of color. So this is how the scanned image looks, because in the video, of course, when doing it, it's not as clear because it's not as good. Camera can pick it up as quite as good as a scanner, of course, but yeah, that's more for the process. And now this is what the scan looks like, and that is the most accurate impression of what the paper actually looks like. So this is what we have. Told you already. Wrote down some notes here. So first idea was resembling something like being on the pier on the Coney Island, or that stuff, and the skyline of Manhattan. Only thing is that I cluttered this up a lot, so I put some of the helicopters, I put some modern Sky City stuff. So all in all, this is all right, but I would say this is too full for my taste. So the next iteration naturally is less full. Also bring the character a little bit closer. This turned out pretty nice, I have to say. Problem with that is that this hand, my version of the statue, of the world domination statue, is kind of here in the corner, and it doesn't really play a role. The problem is you can't put it in the middle, because then it's like behind the character, and that doesn't look good. So if you have a centered character, there's a problem with that, because these basically demand the same kind of space if they were to be bigger. So in the back I put a modern skyscraper, which is fine. The only problem with that is nothing like that is in the game, and no fan will recognize this structure. So it's purely made up by me. I like the panel, but it's maybe not the best in terms of recognizable fan art, right? So the helicopters is something I very quickly knew I wanted this, because it's in the original cover, and I changed them a little bit. So then in the next one, you see that I put more emphasis on this, and I put a little bit more empty space, which I think is better overall. It's a better composition, because everything cannot be full. That was the problem with the first one. If everything is just very full, it takes away from the main attraction, right? So it works better here. Also works similar here in number 2 and 3. Sorry for that. So works pretty well. Also, I like what is in the original cover, which is the lights coming from the helicopter. It's kind of an urgency. They're searching for him, maybe. So there's a narrative in there that I really like. So I wanted to have this in there. Also, I really like the original kind of a skyline with some of the water. That's what was, I think, cool to me, because this is something that everybody recognizes. Like if you have some water and you have that skyline. This is easy to recognize this as the first area in the game, so fans will feel understood. Reference will be plenty with the helicopters, the lights, that skyline. So the only question is, what's the character like? And I said at the beginning I wanted to have it a little bit similar to the pose from the original cover art. And then the last iteration, which I think I like it the most, should be a mixture maybe of this last one and the one before, is you change perspective. It's now profile, but he's looking up as he does, clearly the same as he does it in the original cover art. But then you can see a little bit more what's going on here of like the armor, some interesting tech stuff that is missing from the original art. And then he's looking up, giving him like a visor effect, like a reddish laser, something like that. And then what I put in the back here is a simply fictional thing, and it's the same problem. It looks cool, but it's not in the game and it's not recognizable. So I think what would be cool is to have a post like this and then mix it with the background like here with some helicopters and some of the Manhattan skyline. I think that is what I want to go for. So next up is sketching and drawing the final piece, which will take a while. So join me in that. All right, so once again, jumping into the time lapse here. And of course, needless to say, the pencil drawing of this final thing is an A4 drawing only, but remember I'm drawing very thin with only a 0.1 pen here. So yeah, this is going to take a while, and also did take me a while to come up with the pencil drawing. And you might see this now a little bit more faint. You might think to yourself, what the hell happened? This all of a sudden looks better, lighting is better, there's less shadow on the paper. That is because in between I got better lighting, more natural lighting that I can tune it much better, eats away in the shadow. So I hope you dig that. No more nasty dark shadow from the hand or anything like that. I think it's pretty cool, and yeah, just less distracting. So I said this before also, starting out with something unimportant to just warm up and get sense of the shape of the surrounding. You will never see me like going immediately to the face of the character and yeah, tackling anything that I could potentially mess up, because you get a lot better feeling in the first 1, 2, 3 minutes, your hand working with the paper and feeling the resistance. And once you have that down, once you're like 10-15 minutes in, I have the confidence to do anything basically. So that's how it works for me. And so where I do more erratic lines, like from the trees, the bushes, the waves, I will usually do something like that first. And also there's something that here that you don't really want to have your hand on the lower right corner all of the time before inking, because you will just smudge a little bit of the pencil and it will become less clear what you were trying to say there. So of course in the video pencil appears even more faint than in reality, but it is pretty accurate. My drawings, pencil drawings, are fairly light, using an HB, I think, what is the new HB called, C, I think, pencil. So yeah, not doing, just suggesting all the shading and all the dark areas with the pen. So I can really, I need the freedom when doing the line work to just make a few decisions and just overwrite basically some of the pencil stuff if I think I have a better idea in the moment, right? So maybe you can relate to that and maybe not. Maybe you want to play it super safe, but from experience I can say it doesn't help to play it all that safe. And if you want to comfort yourself taking a risk, I would say remind yourself that if you're going to digitalize this, you can correct whatever small mistakes or single lines did not work out the way you want to. You can still theoretically correct that in Photoshop or once you're in whatever digital painting program you use. So for me, of course, I like to take it serious, and I think you should take it serious because I don't want to erase half the lines there and redo them. But yeah, I want to keep like 99%. That's the goal here. And I also like to have a nice analog drawing, even though people will probably never see it in real life. So yeah. So I'm basically using another brush right now, another pen, which is I think a 0.5 or a 0.7. So usually I draw the light lines, I draw all the lines, I should say, almost with the thin pen. But if I'm filling out stuff, I'm going up to the pretty thick one that you could see right there. But to do some smaller dark areas, I like to have the 0.7, and the 0.7 is good on a grainy paper, in my opinion, but that is very personal taste. Because if you just shrug over the paper, not very carefully, you will get a not consistent black, and I really like the look of that. So because that tip is just that much more of a diameter that it will not fill out all of the grain of the paper. That is something very personal and very much dependent on what paper you use and how much pressure you apply. And you will not even see that here in the video. There is too small of a detail, but you will see it for sure later on in the scan. So now I figured I will deal with some of the stuff that needs to be precise. And that is, of course, architecture. You need some straight lines, you need some correct perspective angles here to create really something interesting that is not just flat skyline, because that's kind of the thing here is you're not getting immersed in that if your background layer is too flat. We only have the big character, and then that background is fairly far away, but there is nothing else. So this needs to provide really something interesting to look at. And also it's nice because it's much less organic than the shape of the character in the middle. So it's really complementing in terms of geometric shapes versus organic shapes in the middle. Also realize how the camera is no longer wobbling, because I also got a new attachment to the table from the camera. So not only new lighting, also that. And that is, I think, the setup I will go with now for some time to make more stuff for you guys. And also, yeah, it is, let's be honest here, people always say, yeah, it's for the viewers. No, it's also for yourself, because if you're doing that stuff, you want to have fun while doing it. And of course I want a nice experience also while doing this, and not fight with a wobbling table or insufficient light source, something like that. So as much as I hope you dig it, I also do it for myself, of course. Now, as you can imagine, because this is quite sped up, it's more than 10 times the original speed. Yeah, you can easily see how this takes hours, and it did take hours. So to give you a quick idea, took me about, I think, 90 minutes to draw the pencil sketch, and I think it's about 4 hours or 4.5 hours just for this, for the black and white inking, because it's I mean, it's like a whole comic page. There's a lot of detail, a lot of lines to draw, a lot of blacks areas, a lot of intricate stuff. So it's like inking a page of comic on A4. Like, I think it's fair game to say, yeah, 4 or 5 hours. It's pretty normal, right? It's I used to say that if you can ink and draw and ink one page of illustration a day, it's pretty good. So yeah, of course, the sketching process that you saw earlier, it took me also some hours. It took me, I think, just 90 minutes to draw, and then at least 90 minutes to do the color. So yeah, stuff really adds up. But on the other hand, you have people that say, I need 50, 60, 70 hours for a painting over the course of like 2-3 weeks. Compared to that, it's fairly slim, I would say. And I was never like extremely patient. So in this case, for me, if it borders on something like 15 hours, that's usually enough for me. But that is also a matter of personal character. Because I was never the type to do like oil painting and have it dry for a few days and then come back to it. It's really not how my process works at all. So that's also another reason for liking watercolor and digital mixed media so much. So now you can see that we're doing some hatching, and I'm not a big fan of hatching. Well, I should say I like hatching, but I don't like to make it very extensive, and I don't like cross hatching. I don't like to hatch areas. I use the hatching to communicate a different kind of dark tone. So usually I will hatch in black areas a little bit to break them. That's how I implement it, and you will not see any I will never try to emulate a lot of gray tones by different different ways of hatching and cross hatching and striations and all of that. It's not my thing. It never worked for me. It to me, it's too old school. I never liked the look. So but that's really a very personal preference. So you see, I'm doing like breaking up those areas, and now you can see something that I really like, even though it's really hard to do, and that is putting a lot of lines next to each other to just ease into the black. I could let the color handle this later, but I think it's really cool if you have the blacks communicate something more than just pure black and white areas, I should say. So the density of structure also here, underneath the nose and underneath something like the face structure, even though it's just shadow lines that are not filled, I think you complete them kind of in your head. It's almost like an illusion. That's the stuff that is really interesting to me. I don't want to overdraw ever any image. I much rather have less lines than more lines. and the lines that you have, then they need to be on point. And I think that's a little bit a less American style and a little bit more of a European / Asian style there, because the Americans, at least like 20 years ago, everybody was doing a lot of hatching, lots and lots of hatching, in all the graphic novels, all the comic books. So I think this got less because coloring process is so much better nowadays. So now we put the more intricate detail. You could see that I finally did the face, which is always, yeah, I don't have to tell you guys this, but one bad stroke around the nose or around the mouth eye area can really, yeah, make you regret, and then you will have to correct it because it will change the expression I should say, on the face too much, and it's not desirable. You can't really mess up on those crucial details. So yeah, slowly we're getting somewhere here. And the hair is also something that I realize depends so much on style and stylistic choices. You can almost not draw it, and you can overdraw it. You can fill the whole hair volume with strokes, which is also not my thing. I like the over exposed look where stuff is just whitened out. I really like to think about my black and white drawings in this fashion. It's just high contrast, overexposed, and yeah, hard shadows and hard white out areas, right? But that's again very, very personal preference. You can easily do something completely different and can look amazing, right? So the thing is that, yeah, you kind of need to do in this reduced style, which black and white inking is. It shows the most style, I think, there, because of the lack of any other media, and you just have the black line and that's it. And that's also what is very compelling about it. So now filling that up with the old thick, I don't even know what it's called, the Faber-Castell thick pen brush. That is really, really handy. And I mean, it doesn't really matter what kind of a pen you use, as long as the ink has a consistent look. Back in the day, we had there was Copic, which had good ink, and there was some brands where you would use the ink and sometimes it would get a little bit bluish, and the other ink would be more neutral, and then the other ink would be more reddish, and mixing that on a paper, it really doesn't look good. Even though, of course, we can, in the scan afterwards, desaturate that and get it out, but I don't like if it's inconsistent on paper. So therefore, I suggest you get yourself a brand, or you mix and match brands where you know that the ink is consistent. And also, of course, I want all my ink to be waterproof, because I never know when I want to go over it with watercolor or just some markers, and I don't want that ink to dissolve. So I was hesitant with these helicopters, and the reason for that is that I did not define too much detail in them. So I basically designed them there on the spot in terms of cockpit application, rotor booster, all of that stuff. I had an idea, and yeah, the pencil drawing is providing the outline, but I had no idea what I would do inside of the structure. I'm very much relying on my experience in drawing spaceships there and coming up with something. And of course, it's going to be dark. It's dark in dark. and the majority, again, it will be just blacked out or have a striated dark look to it. And here it's very good example of the illusion of detail, what I said earlier. If you use a black and you're just not very consistent and you leave little spots, it will look like intentional detail sometimes. Of course, it's tricky. You have to practice this, and this has to go along with your style, but it can be really cool if you can pull that off. Sorry for putting my mug in front of the camera there, but it's really, you have to imagine the camera is right in front of my head, yeah, mounted there. So it's sometimes, or I forget, I get so into it that I don't realize that I'm putting parts of my head in front of the camera. So that is something that usually you won't even know in the videos, but it is a thing that people struggle with, I guess. So now, yeah, looks pretty much done. You could leave it at that, but I then decided that I really want this very traditional look, almost like 90s skyline look with the black on top and then slowly dissolving into bleeding out towards the ground where all the artificial lights are. And I decided to ink that really in, so that you can get something really crispy. And that was a risk to take because I did not know if this would look particularly good. If you struggle with something like that, you can, for example, first do a scan. That means you have a fail-safe copy digitalized already, and then just continue drawing and see how it goes. But yeah, you might risk ruining your actual analog drawing there. So that's always, there's always that risk. And you can see I'm doing the same thing. I'm not just putting down black areas, I'm breaking them a lot. And it's to suggest edges, to suggest windows, lights, and then using linear hatching towards the bottom, where I later will have the light coming in. It's good if you can feel this already in the black and white drawing. The ink should already communicate that in a way. And like it's kind of layered like a diorama almost. So the background buildings, I will not fill them with anything because think of it, it's more like it's fading. It's not as much contrast in the back there as there is in front. It would look too flat if I would black out everything, so not doing that. And yeah, in a minute we're done here. Just some finishing touches. And then we'll have to scan it. Oh yeah, also, pro tip, don't forget to sign your artwork. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this process of me drawing the piece, the final piece. We're down to one more thing to go, obviously, which is I have to digitalize this in my scanner and then jump into Photoshop and clean it up, refine it a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how to color it, or how I will color it in this instance. Because of course the sketches were done with a little bit of watercolor, but for the final thing I'm planning on doing flat colors like I usually do with my graphic novel style illustrations. But I want to have a little bit more of tones overlapping each other. I think that would look really cool, just a little bit like the watercolor does sometimes. So we'll see what we can do in a minute. Alright guys, we are in Photoshop and this is the final drawing. Now, if you have a very keen eye, you might have noticed that this changed a little bit. Just showing you. So this was what it was like when I just scanned it, and it was higher. It went on down there. But what I realized is that it was too high of a portrait. It's not a good format for anything later. It should be at least 4:3, which is what I changed it to. So I add a little bit to the sides and I cut from the bottom, rearranged some of the helicopters, and I rearranged some of the water. Luckily, if you have a nice process, you can always do this. So what I did here is I already isolated the stroke, pretty much the same way that I did in the graphic novel illustration that I did some months ago. So what does it mean? It means that there is no white in the drawing anymore. And this gives me, of course, some freedom for later. I could theoretically lock the whole thing and then apply color to it, which is a cool effect. I'm not sure if you're going to do that later, but there is that possibility, especially where there is lighting going on. It could be a really cool effect. Also, very unlike me, I put everything in a little folder called lineart, and that is because I also divided the choppers from the main drawing, because I want there a little bit of control, because I can't, it's very hard to anticipate how the lighting cones will look like later, so I want some control there. And then I cut away some stuff that I'm just keeping for later. And then what I have also on top is the original, of course, which is was just there for comparison reasons, really. And then what I have here is a light map of paper texture, which is completely optional. I usually never use this. I just thought it would be fun. And what this does, if you look closely over here, it has a very strong texture that it applies via screen overlay effect. I shouldn't say overlay because that is a separate effect. It's on screen, which means only the bright stuff will show up and the dark stuff will not. And then I put it all the way down to only a few percent because I want this exact effect to happen. I don't want the blacks to be too monotone, right? So even here, I tuned this black down. There is a little bit of variation going on, as you can see in the readings of RGB down here. But if you apply the light map, it kind of gives this a nice, it loosens up the black a little bit, just in a very nice and organic way. Puts emphasis on the fact that it is an analog drawing and it's not done by the computer. And I'm putting this down like 8%, something like this. Really, I just want this effect a little bit. And maybe you have to tune it later when the color comes in, because the color, of course, will sit underneath, and this will, all the blacks will go on top and add up to maybe a darker tone that I intended right now. So now we have this set up. We can close this, but I know that since this is a blending effect that goes on top of everything, in order to define the color, you want this off, because else if you're selecting color, you're always selecting with this shit on top, and that means you never get the exact color that will allow you to just continue working in the same color. So therefore, if you have anything like this, make sure to switch it off. All right, now we're pretty much ready to go. I have, just for your information, quite some pixel real estate. I have 7,500 pixels of height. You could have much more than that, but then again, we'll slow down the whole thing once it gets layers and layers. Also, I changed this to an sRGB profile, like I always do, and then clean it up a little bit, and now we're pretty much ready to go. So what I'm doing, and I won't do this all live because this will take, I guess it will take some 5 hours or something like that. So I'm gonna get myself off camera in a minute, and then you will just give you some commentary and you can enjoy the process a little bit faster, right? So, but the basic setup is always the same. I want to make sure that I have what I need in terms of tones and layers. So that means I need a layer that is the background, and then from there I will work my way. Yeah, maybe this is, for the beginning, is even too dark, and then I will work my way. I'm just gonna give you an example. You have seen me do this before, I'm sure. This will not look good, but it is very good technique. So you zoom as much as you feel like you should, but don't zoom all the way. You won't do yourself a favor there. So what we're doing now is we're establishing base layers, and this you can do it a little bit more sloppy in the beginning, and my tip is to pick a tone that stands out from the other tone, so that you can see what the hell you're doing and how basically the color overlaps the black of the drawing. And you can always refine this. Just make sure you're on a separate layer. Make sure you're 100% opacity. You want this not to be transparent. You want this to be a solid color, because this is where we later build all of the tones of the character on top via clipping masks. So we can only do this if we have a solid foundation. For this, I'm not too worried. You maybe already freak out because I'm not being accurate here, but it really doesn't matter, because I will just do this rough and then refine it in a second. So all of that, first we make sure that we have everything, and my philosophy here is that I can overdo the color, and then later I will zoom in there, and where it really matters I will counter erase this with pretty much also a flat eraser, like so, and then continue painting, and just make sure that I have everything that I need inside. So all the skin tones, all the tones of the jacket, they will come on top of this layer via clipping masks. That means the outline thing, you only need to do it accurate once, and then you're set, basically. Also, of course, you can do a selection from this. As you all know, you get it, and you get it perfectly, because it is 100% of opacity. So never forget that you have this option at hand, which is really handy sometimes, especially if you want to make some blending layers, some not normal layer on top, right? So it could be really good for something like that. So already it's not such a terrible color combination, is it? Of course it will not stay like that, but in terms of the lighting, we could do something, we will do something reddish. So yeah, there's that. And just going to finish this little example, and then I am going to do the rest of the work in the time lapse, as I said earlier. I think I have quite some videos already where you can watch me paint for hours and hours and hours. However, if you want to see more live paintings, let me know in the comments. There's a problem with that, obviously, which is that a painting that I am satisfied with, that is not just a quick demo, it will take a lot of hours sometimes. So we're not only talking 3-4 hours, we might talk 10 hours or even more than that. So it's not really up for debate that I'm going to sit for 10 hours in a video. I don't think anybody has ever published a 10-hour video on YouTube. So I don't think that is, I don't think people would watch that. So there is a limitation there, which is why I feel like a mixture of that and the time lapse is really where it's at. So that way you can get some commentary, you can watch me paint some and talk some, and then get a real progress inside of like 20 minutes, half an hour, and then it's really refined and we can continue to talk about it. So once this is coming along, all I need is the bigger and bigger brush. And be careful that you don't mess up the nice work on the outside that you've already done, of course. And then once this feels secure, I'm going to take bigger and bigger brushes, also to make sure that I have no holes in this foundation. And once that is established, luckily the outline, the outer shape of this character is fairly easy to draw, right? It's not like there's 1,000 strands of hair or anything like that. So this is the foundation, and then what I meant is that everything else comes on top via clipping mask. This means now, of course, I can tune this first and foremost. I can tune this, and I think I will tune it to something that is very bright. So desaturate, and then we'll go into the blue immediately. Desaturate maybe even further. Maybe you have like something like almost a skin tone. It really doesn't matter. Point being is that you go somewhere from here, and then the next thing we can do is we can build up the shade on the character. For example, everywhere here I can now draw shadows in and start rendering the character. This is all connected via clipping mask, which means I cannot draw outside of this area, and this is how I will do the majority of the foundation color work. So as I said, I will now get myself off screen, jump into the time lapse, see you guys later with the result. Have fun. Right, and fun you should have, because it's not always super exciting. And usually in this style of illustration, as I showed it before, the beginning is the boring part. So we're blocking in, establishing background, foreground in a manner that we can then place codependent layers and clipping masks upon the foundation, and that is just not always so exciting. So the more granular it gets, the more exciting it gets, I would say. In the beginning, yeah, you can do like just neon colors, just like I did, to be sure that you're not that you get everything included in the area. You need a good color contrast to be able to judge that. And once you have this established and you're certain that you have your foundation right, and by foundation I mean one underlying layer for every big volume that is either an object or just a foreground, middle ground. And that way you can then stop worrying about it later. Because, of course, in Photoshop, in digital work, every single refined shape, we only have to do it once. And after that, we can either quick select it, we can save a selection, or we can just use clipping masks and we'll never have to do this exact work ever again, which is then more or less where the fun begins, because you don't feel like a robot anymore. So I would say, yeah, the first hour you're a robot, you're filling in some shapes, but even then now, already we're doing some nice decision making that really helps to render the shapes. So should go, of course, from the big volumes to the smaller volumes. So I'm just making sure everything is here. The hair and the jacket, the armor, the skin tones, and then in a minute we can even tweak it more. As long as you have just a tone on a layer separate, you can tune it infinitely. It's really cool that way. So you can really just go through the spectrum like I do here with the hue and saturation setting, which is the best setting hands down to do this kind of a color process, because you can just see immediately what happens if I up saturation, down saturation, or go through the hues and do more warmth on the same tone, or more blues, more greens. And you can even isolate, of course, the color channels. So it's really, it's much easier than to do this by hand in terms of pure color composition. Of course, later on, you will have tricks and stuff that you cannot possibly do analog, and that provide their own challenges in the digital world of painting, right? But up to now, what I'm doing, you could have done this in basically Photoshop 7 in 1999 no problem, apart maybe from the resolution that is really substantial. I think we're dealing with 8,000 pixels by 5,000, something like that. So now you can see that once those layers are established, I'm immediately tweaking the tones so that you can get a nice feel. Of course, blue is tinting everything, but a desaturated blue appears a little bit like pale skin here, a little bit more reddish than the saturated blue. So it's all color is just very relative. So we're just up to now only in the blue spectrum, like very, very dense spectrum here of color. It's just via saturation, and that makes the difference, and a little bit of hue between the more cyany and the more reddish kind of blues here. And now this is the first time we see color other than blue. And that's I wanted to try this. It's a nice color contrast, and also I know that I will be putting reds for the visor and for some of the lighting effects of the character later. So we already know this from the watercolor sketch. And this, of course, is easy to manipulate. Again, we can just clearly see, of course, we want a city in the back there that is alive and not dead. You want the lights on. You want a living night city kind of scene. That's where, yeah, basically adventure lies. It's kind of a very different feel if you're in front of the dead city. You'll have to ask yourself, why is there nothing happening? So, and of course, we all know that in this case there is storytelling in this kind of illustration. So the character will venture out into the city and then do all the stuff that basically the game provides, right? So again, in case you're interested how long this all takes, being sped up and all, I think we're looking at another 4.5 hours just for coloring here. So yeah, it's really, this whole project will total me painting for, I guess, some 13-14 hours at least. Yes, yeah. Then again, we have quite something to show for. Sketches are pretty nice, and then you have a nice process. You learned something and also did really a nice illustration. Even though, let's be honest, if you're not as experienced, you might not do your best work every single time, but at least through the sketch iterations and getting something done, it means you learn something. The worst thing is that you want to do more that you can do, and then you just lose interest and you leave it and you never learn how to fix it. In that case, it would be better to have it be worse and to finish it, in my opinion. But of course, that's easier said than done, because we all know how much it sucks if you're not satisfied with the piece that you're doing. Of course, that is very, very human. And I'm not telling you that you shouldn't feel this way or anything like that. But just be aware, everybody struggles. Now, what does the trick here for these spotlights? As you can see, maybe they switched, and they switched because I changed layer blending to overlay. You can see it even here in my blend settings. For this kind of lighting, colorization, and sometimes even shadowing, I use a lot of overlay. Because overlay, it preserves a lot of the vibrance of the color. It's a really, really cool feature. So yeah, if you never tried it, I recommend it pretty much in all my tutorials. The second most blending effect after a normal layer that I use is overlay, bar none. So now some of the lighting comes in. Now you can see now how the coloring complements the black and white drawing of those building, and with the hatches and striations that they break apart towards the down side, and really it's like the light is eating them. That is what I'm going for. Of course, yeah, you can work much more color shades in, but I always think that the black and white drawing, it has to resolve something. It's not just there to tell you where to put the color, because if you can do away with it, if you don't need it, then why did you do it? That's kind of my approach to it. So in the background, I always leave some stuff very intentionally under rendered by the color, so that you have the impression that the line work does more of the lifting. But again, that's a feeling thing. That's a very personal preference. That is really where your art style is coming through, because you can overpaint everything, and to some people that would not even be overpainting. They would just be, yeah, I rendered it nicely. For me, there has to be a difference. There has to be some areas need to be rendered pretty well. They utilize the color. For me, that's mostly the bright parts, and then in the dark parts where I have the hatching and the striation from the ink stroke, I want that to resolve the problems there. I don't want to double that with the color. So assigning a clear role to the brush strokes and to the inking is, I think, is crucial. You don't want to hide the ink, because think about it. It's like we ink this for hours, and it's kind of the appeal that you see the ink and the expertise and the style in the ink stroke. If you don't see that, then you don't really need to ink it, really. So now rendering some of the hair. And there you can really see that I am not an anime artist, because none of the tropes are really here. So the hair, like the area style of rendering hair that they use lots of times, I'm not too fond doing. For me, a volume is just a volume. It doesn't matter if it's the glasses or the face or the helicopter. It's just a shape is a shape, and I just think about how much contrast I want and where I want the lighting to be and how reflective or matte I want to be the surface to be. So yeah, that's the thing. I don't think, oh, it's an eye, it's a hair, I have to apply a certain method of rendering. That's just never crossed my mind. And I think that's just where people are imitating a lot of tropes, which can be good, because if it looks good at the end of the day, if it looks good, it's good, right? But it might not look as original. So now we're doing experiment. I think I needed a little bit more of light, and that is purely for compository reasons, because now we have upper left corner is some light, and the most exposed closest helicopter, and then bottom right was pretty dark. And of course, most of the contrast should be in the middle, which it is. And I just thought it could be nice dividing a little bit the canvas a little bit more with these spotlights coming in from off screen, kind of like I did in the sketch there. So yeah, that might be a subconscious influence of the sketching session there. And now is like pretty much the point where I'm trying out stuff to make everything look cooler, which is sometimes, and you end up overdoing it. But in this case, yeah, I pretty much like to put the red on something else, and I put it in the ear device, so that there is something other than the visor that emits some kind of a red. Trying out stuff there, but it's not really going anywhere. That you just see that this is like doubling the effect, it's overdoing it, and I think I just end up doing a very subtle glow until later, that is. So sometimes you see the screen flickering, and that is me switching on and off layers, because I need to see if this is better with the layer or without the layer. I need to really recheck contrast a lot to see if I'm doing the vibrancy that I want. Now this is like kind of now in an area where you could call it a day anytime. You can say I'm done, and it will look good, it will look all right. And this is what I realized here, but I said to myself, yeah, I want a little bit more, because I like what is going on the arm, on the jacket, but a little bit of the like more of a shading, breaking up the hard edges a little bit more, and you can see me doing that right now. This is a smudge tool, and I pretty much combined the entire character layer to be able to just smudge those volumes around and to just intuitively change them. I did it, I'm doing it a lot on the face. So at that point, because I realized I'm not changing that color anymore substantially, so might as well have a combined layer of that color path of the character, and then you regain some freedom to mess with all of the tones. So soften some, as you can see, and smudge some and draw over some in a more even blend, right? Like here, to make it even more vibrant and a little bit more less boring, I should say, a little bit more painterly, and not just like linear color shades that overlap. And you can see that this, you can also overdo it, and when you stop, that's up to you. And you can see me thinking about it a little bit. For a little bit I'm just, yeah, is this really good, is really better than before? But I end up and sometimes I end up deleting some of it again, because I think I overdid it. So there's something also very important. You should question yourself a little bit, and I think as you have more experience, it will be more and more the case that you might ruin something that was really good, and you have to take a step back and think about whether that was less is sometimes more, right? So now I finally have a nice solution for this visor effect. I'm putting a little bit of more reds, more multi-dimensional reds. Don't ask me what that is, that effect. I don't know how I came up with that. And maybe I didn't, maybe I just subconsciously copy it from somewhere, which also happens a lot in art. And now we're doing some final touches, I would say, some more softer strokes. This was kind of a cool experiment where you just emphasize something happening, something erratic with that light reflections there, which of course are highly unrealistic. But then again, we're not doing this to have realistic depictions of everything, right? So then what was missing more or less were some of the light on like the water, and this I really wanted to bring because I had it in one of the sketches and it really looked cool already in a miniature form. So I wanted to bring it in a way back at all cost. And of course this is more subtle, but I think it gives this water surface like the plasticity that just a little bit that it needs, and reinforces the lights. Now, yeah, we have most of the layers that we have now are background layers, because you can't really combine overlay with other blending effects too well, as you might realize. So there's another idea that all of a sudden I put this up for very long. Very early in the process I thought about moving this helicopter and never did, and now I have to cut multiple layers in order to achieve that, and just make it so that it does not align with the front of the face too much, which is much better in my opinion. And then we're getting a second beam, and that's just like finishing touches. Bring back the signature, and then in a second we'll have a look at the finished piece. So all of this stuff now is just post-process blending on top of everything. It's really not very complicated. And now we're done. Added just a little bit of grain, as I said it before, to give it a little bit of a more analog feeling. And yeah, that's it. So guys, I hope you liked this quite lengthy process. Somehow we came out on the other end. I think we took a total of like, I'd say 14 to 15 hours, which might sound a lot. Well, to traditional artists, this is nothing, of course. But yeah, if you're working on stuff like this, it's a realistic time frame. Be sure not to undercharge. It's very important, right? So let me know what you think. If you want the artwork, head over to ArtStation. Link is in the description, as always. Also, guys, if you were wondering how to do certain little aspects of this process, make sure to head over to my tutorials playlist. I've explained a lot there in other videos, and almost all the information, well, no, not almost all the information that you need to produce something like this. I have already talked about it for sure. And if not, let me know. And also, if you want to see more similar stuff, or if you want to see more tutorials, let me know. That's it from me for now. See you next time.